All right. I'm just going to wait a few minutes for anyone that's trickling in to come on in. It's 10 o'clock on the dot. I just wanted to be here on time first and foremost because that matters to me. So if you're here on time, thank you. I appreciate you. And, it's an important thing in life. And if anyone's trickling in, now it's still okay. So let me just start off with a quick introduction. My name is Param. It must be Saturday because here I am once again standing live inside my living room on March 6th, 2021, getting ready for another awesome family education and support group. Good morning, St. John. Family education lecture. We're going to, as you know, we talk about anything and everything related to mental health, with addiction, with recovery. And it's been wonderful. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this, and I look forward to continuing to build on this program that we have. We're doing some good things in the community, getting the word out. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll even have more people coming in, hopefully building on the wisdom that already exists inside this group with the ones that have been so committed in participating and moving forward. Hi, Eileen. I hope you're doing well. Yep, my mouth is definitely better. Full recovery, 100%. So thank you for remembering. So all that being said, today is, let me just do a quick introduction of myself too, by the way. So my name is Param Nimatola. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I am a licensed addictions counselor, and I'm also clean and sober. So I do know the recovery realm on a personal and professional side. So hopefully all of that, gives me the platform to be able to stand in front of you and give you some information. Good morning, Monir John. And to be able to add some value to your Saturday. So today we're going to talk about, it's a topic that obviously I've talked about in the past, but I want to really dive deep into it. And today I really encourage on the side chat box, if you're here watching this, to be able to, whether you want to ask questions about what I'm talking about, whether you want to share insight about what I'm talking about, you're more than welcome to. And I want to make it as engaging and possible as I can for you in this process. So today we're talking about self-care, but I really want to break it down into something that you can take with you and actually apply into your life, right? So anytime you're in any type of recovery program, they're always going to be talking about self-care. We know that. But how can you actually take what you're hearing and have a practical application of it in your life to be able to reap the benefits of it, okay? So you've heard one of my talks before, and I say this, and I'm going to say it again. Self-care is not a luxury. Self-care is a necessity, okay? So it's not something you do when you have a few extra bucks in your pocket. It's not some massage studio you go to. It's not some, fancy place that you go to. What self-care is something that's necessary. It's something that's vital. It's something that's required for you in the recovery space. So you need self-care in order to be able to not only just manage recovery, but manage life. So when I go through this process, whether you have a pen and paper in hand, that's okay. If not, it's okay. Just go back and watch this. There are a few areas that I need you to write down. And what those areas are the following. So you need to write down the word personal, so personal self-care. You need to write down the word psychological self-care, emotional self-care, professional self-care, and the very last one is spiritual, and your spiritual self-care. So imagine having a piece of paper and you have personal, psychological, emotional, professional, spiritual, and what I want you to do is once you look at that, right, I'm going to talk about what needs to go in those areas, what those areas need to look like, and then you, in your own time, or even today in the side chat, you could talk about where you feel like you need to work on. If you need some help with working on it, what that would look like. Feel free to ask questions, because I believe that self-care is the key of success in not only recovery, but also in life. Okay? Show me someone that can take care of their overall psychological, emotional, physical, spiritual, professional health, and I'll show you someone that's doing a heck of a good job managing their life. But if you show me someone that is struggling in those areas, I will show you someone that's overwhelmed, someone that's stressed, someone that gets agitated, aggravated, someone that gives up on their goals and dreams, and it's highly correlated, okay? So bear with me. We're going to go through these one at a time. And also there's something else I'm doing. Let me just shout this out real quick. Every Sunday at 1:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I go on YouTube with this doctor, a brilliant doctor. His name is Dr. Banimat, and Dr. B we can call him. And last week, if you go on my personal Facebook page, just Param Nimatola, you could see our talk from last week. He is a medical doctor. He's a professor. He was a professor at UCLA, at UCI. He goes in there and talks about addiction, and I come in as the clinician, the counselor, the therapist, and we collaborate. And we actually take live calls. So people call in, and we respond to them live. So go check that out. I'll put a link up for you later, but that's something else I'm doing Sunday to hopefully add some value to your life. So let's start off with the most important one. Personal self-care. And I'll tell you this, if you're a family member watching this, I know everyone watching this, you either have a son, a loved one, a grandchild, you got someone on the side over here that you're doing this for. That's why you got introduced to me. But why is personal self-care so important? And I'll tell you this, all of us as human beings, we wear different hats in life, okay? There's a hat that we wear when we're at work. There's a hat that we wear when we're with our partners. There's a hat that we wear when we're with our friends. There's a hat that we wear when no one's around, right? The most important part of all this is to remember that all of those hats need to go on the same head. So we have to be so in tune with who we are that when we wear all these different hats, it doesn't really change us. But here's what happens, my friends. When addiction comes into your world, when mental health comes into your world, and it just rattles you, and it's like a tornado that goes through, what's the very first thing that you lose sight of? Yourself. Because we're so externally focused on something that's larger than life, like addiction, something that's more distracting, like mental health, that we forget the person wearing the hat. We forget about ourselves. So here's a good question to ask you is, when you remove all those hats, when you remove all those things that you identify with, the husband, the wife, the son, the employee, the friend, when you remove all of those labels that you've given yourself, when you remove them all, who are you underneath it all? This is a hard question for some people, because if I ask somebody, who are you? They'll say, well, I'm a father or I'm a mother. It's like, no. Who are you? That's in relation to someone else. Well, I'm an employee. I work at this place. No, I didn't say where you work. Who are you? And people go through, and I've done this with lots of people, by the way. So as I'm saying this, you're probably realizing, like, wait, if someone asks me, who am I? Can I ask that without telling them what I do? It's a really, really challenging thing to do. So personal self-care, when you're getting in the recovery process, is this. You have to realize, last week I talked about recovery and I talked about addiction like a freaking car accident, my friends. When all of a sudden the car stops and someone goes to get clean and sober, someone gets help for their mental health, the survivors of the car, which are oftentimes the family members, are getting up out of the car. Maybe someone had to come rescue you with the jaws of life, but you're getting out of the car not knowing which way is up. I've talked to family members when their loved one just gets into treatment. They seem and sound like someone that's just getting off drugs. They are so disoriented. They are so lost. They are so afraid. They are so shell-shocked. They have PTSD. If you don't think a family member can have post-traumatic stress disorder, clinically diagnosed by a clinician, after their loved one goes through addiction, then you're not really looking at your own experience the way that it actually was. If you look at all of the times, my friends, that because of someone's mental health deteriorating, or because of addiction living inside your home, that you experience significant amount of trauma day over day, week over week, month over month, which, by the way, turns into complex trauma, right? If you're wondering why right now you sometimes get triggered at just a sight or a sound because it reminds you of something that happened then and there, that is a trauma response. And sometimes family members don't want to accept that, or they don't want to look at it that way. So this is why these talks are so important, is because you're sitting here in front of this computer, in front of your cell phone or something, and you're saying, man, I really need to hear this because this guy's right. I went through hell and back. I don't know how I've gotten to this point. So you got to, first of all, separate yourself and your loved one's mental health, separate yourself and your loved one's addiction, Separate yourself and your loved one's chaos and start to focus on yourself. Who are you? What happened to you? Where did you lose connection to yourself? What kind of personal self-care can you do? So what does that look like, right? So when in your little piece of paper that you have and you have the word personal self-care, the first question is, who am I? That's the first question. You got to figure that one out for yourself. How do you figure it out? You spend a lot of time with yourself. You do a lot of digging. You do a lot of soul searching. You try to figure out who you are when you're not your labels, right? The second one after that is you need to set for yourself, and I'm not talking about your loved ones' goals or their dreams or what they're going to do next, or if they're going to go to school, or if they're going to get a job, or where they're going to live. None of that stuff. What are you going to do? What are your short-term goals as a family member? What are your long-term goals as a family member? I've said this to families. They're like, wait, are you asking about me or my kid? I'm like, no, I'm asking about you. And they say, well, that's the first time in a long time I even thought about my goals. And this person might only be like 40, 50, 60 years old, and they stop thinking about their goals. At that point, they still got half their life ahead of them. They still got 20, 30 years ahead of them without goals. So I'm saying this with a little smile on my face because I know for a fact that some of you are like, oh my God, we're so focused on the goals of our kid, we forgot about our goals of ourselves. If you're not headed anywhere, you're not going to get there. So as a part of personal self-care, make sure that you start to distinguish what your own goals are, right? What your own goals are. Where are you headed? What are you trying to do? And then the last one about this one is you got to learn how to relax, right? As a family member, you have to learn how to relax. Some of the most tense people I've ever met are not the drug addict, alcoholic, or the person going through mental health issues, is the family member. Because oftentimes the person with the addiction problem, they're comfortably numb. They use substances to just take off the edge, right? But the family member is just there, just anxious for years, stressed out for years. And when their loved one actually gets clean and sober and they get into the recovery world and they're just left, they don't know how to relax. So can you find ways to take care of your personal self-care? So that's the number one. I really wanted to talk about that one in depth because you need to get permission from someone like me to say, focus on you first. Focus on you first. That's the only way you're going to be able to be there for your loved one when they need you, if they need you, right? But if you're not there for yourself, no one else will be, by the way. I hope you know that. That's the way. I know that sounds like harsh to say, but if you're not going to put yourself first in life, you're really going to have a hard time finding someone else that will. You're really going to have a hard time finding someone else that will. And that's just the truth. So put yourself first, take care of yourself, feel empowered, get yourself back, develop an identity, realize who you are, realize what you want out of life. Yes, if you're 60 years old, if you're 70 years old, you need to have goals. Not like, oh, it's nice to do it. You need to have it, or else you're not going to do that well for the rest of your life. Right? You're not going to do that well for the rest of your life. That's one of the things. There's research on people that get retired. The life expectancy of human beings that retire in countries like this is very short. You want to know why? Because they went to the finish line, right? They got to where they said you were supposed to get to, and then they just put their foot off the brakes, the foot off the gas, and they just kind of go on cruise control without goals. The brain stops working. They call it this is really cool. They call it the law of use. So if you don't use something in life, you lose it, right? If I grab my arm and I tape it to my hand, to my body, right? So if I grab this functioning arm and I tape it to my body and I tape it there for an extended period of time, not that long, by the way. Yeah, Jim, no retirement for you, my man. You're going to be working there. We're working at Buckeye for a while, dude. Keep it up. So the law of no use. Sorry, I got excited when he said that. It's if you tape your arm to your body, right, and you just don't use it for a week, don't use it for maybe 2 weeks, guess what's going to happen? That arm will never work again. That arm will never work again. There's people that, blood circulation stops to their arm on a heroin nod and they lose their limb. So if you don't use your mind, if you just stagnate and don't use your mind, you're going to lose it. I think I pounded that one home enough. So that's personal self-care. When you draw the circle, write personal and find out what you're doing for it. The next one is psychological self-care. So why is this one so important? Because going through addictions, I'm going to say it again, is a traumatic process. Going through the mental health of your loved one. For those of you who are watching this and you're here because your loved one is going through mental health diagnosis that scare you, right? They're having delusions, they're having psychosis, they're having schizophrenia, they're having schizoid personality, that kind of stuff's coming out and you're getting scared, right? As a human being, your thoughts are going to get impaired. You're going to start getting impacted by that. What kind of psychological impact am I talking about? Well, there's worry. Constant worrying over an extended period of time impacts the mind. There is fear. Worry turns into fear. Fear turns on. I've shared this with you guys before, and I'm going to say it again because this stuff is real and you need to keep being reminded of it. Fear, whether it's real or perceived, so whether something's actually happening or I think something's going to happen, turns on the fight or flight mechanism of the brain. When the fight or flight mechanism of the brain turns on, all of the other organs of the body dim down in order to preserve as much energy as possible to the survival. So that's why people that are constantly worried, people that are constantly in fear, they have really weak immune systems. They're constantly sick. They're constantly unable to focus. So yeah, at the level of thought, it causes physical illness, right? Psychosomatic illness, mind-body illness. So your thoughts are really important. So what you got to do is you got to write down psychological well-being and how do you take care of your mind in the recovery process. Psychological self-care, what do you do? So do you journal? Do you write down your thoughts? Do you go see a therapist? Do you have a life coach? Do you have a sponsor? And all these different things I'm saying, for example, the life coach that I talk about is they're out there, and the reason why they're beneficial is even the greatest athletes in the world have coaches. And you guys know I'm a high school basketball coach. Even the greatest athletes in the world, the top tier, the best ones, they have coaches. So something as simple as a life coach, you might be thinking, how is that going to help me? Well, it's someone that's third party that you can talk to, right? It's a professional. It might not be this depth of therapy, and it might not be 12-step rooted like a sponsorship in recovery, but it might be someone you just need to talk to about your stress. It might be just someone you need to talk to about your work-life balance, whatever it is. These things help us with our mind. They help us with our thoughts because we need it when we get clean and sober. We need it when family members get, support their loved one who's getting clean and sober. We need it when someone's getting into the mental health recovery space. There's a story that I always share. I'm going to do the fastest version of it that I possibly can because there's about 3 people here that haven't heard me say this, but it's this axe story. So I got to share this with you. Remember this. Do you use your mind or does your mind use you? Okay? That comes from a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and he says, do you use your mind or does your mind use you? And what this axe story says is this. It's a story about this man. I'm going to give you a short down version of it. He's been unemployed for a long period of time, and he has a wife and he's got 2 children, and he's looking for a job. He can't find a job in the field that he's in, and he's looking in the newspaper one day, and he sees this job hiring at a lumber yard. So he decides to say, you know what, I need to pay for my family, I need to support my life, I'm going to go work in this lumber yard. He goes to work, it's a few hours away. Once he walks in, the boss gives him this big giant axe. He grabs the axe and he says, your job is to go knock down as many trees as you possibly can. He goes to the lumber yard and he starts chopping and chopping and chopping at these trees in this forest and just knocking. By the end of the day, the boss says, I've never seen someone knock down so many trees as you have. Here's an extra bonus. Looking forward to having you back. And the guy drives all the way back home and gets some toys for his kids on the way home, pays the rent that they were behind on. And the wife says, oh my God, you finally found something that we can, survive off of. So, he goes back to work another day, and the next day he goes and he works twice as hard with the same axe. And he's working hard and he's working hard and he's working hard. By the end of the day, he's only knocked down half of the trees, despite of working twice as hard. He goes back home, doesn't get the bonus, And the wife says, well, maybe you were tired, maybe your muscles were sore, you just relax, I'll take care of the kids, eat some pasta, go to sleep early. He goes back another day. He goes back to work, he grabs the same axe, and he goes to work 3 times as hard. And I'll tell you why this is important, because now he's working 3 times as hard to get back what he got the first day to make up for the second day. And he goes and he's knocking trees and he's knocking trees and he's knocking trees. Halfway through the day, he's sitting underneath a tree in the shade and he hasn't knocked down 1 tree. The boss walks up to him and says, what's going on? Why haven't you succeeded here? And he's like, I don't know. I've been working my ass off. I've been working 3 times as hard and I can't seem to knock down a tree. And the boss says, well, in the middle of all this working so hard, did you ever take time to stop and sharpen your axe? Right? So what does this story teach us, teach you as family members, is this. You've been going through it, right? Dealing with addiction of a loved one is your axe. Your mind is your axe. Every day you go and you chop and you chop and you chop and you wonder sometimes why you, despite of trying so much harder, you're not getting back the results you want to get. Well, did you take time to stop and sharpen your axe? And that becomes really important because finding ways to sharpen your axe, and it's different for everybody, it becomes a priority for you. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be walking around life with an axe that's unable to cut anything, wondering why no matter why you try 3 times as hard, you can't achieve the results you want. So that's the part for psychological self-care. And the next one is going to be for emotional self-care. So again, so you have a piece of paper, you have personal right here, you have psychological right here, now you have emotional right here. What do you do for your emotions? And oh man, is this one that's really, really underrated? Because as soon as we start going in the recovery process, as soon as your loved one starts to kind of heal or do the recovery thing, we forget everything that's stuffed and bottled into us. So the first one for emotional self-care is self-compassion. I'm telling you, you think your loved ones have a hard time forgiving themselves? You have a hard time forgiving yourself. You have a hard time giving compassion to yourself about the journey you were on. I've had so many family members have regret about how they went about the recovery process, and they say, oh, if I only would have known, if I only would have done this. Remember this, my friends, you did the best you could with the amount of information you had at the time. Okay? So if you're having a hard time saying, why didn't I get this earlier? Why didn't I realize this earlier? Why didn't I do this earlier? You got to at some point forgive yourself, and you got to have a little compassion for yourself, because like I said, at the time you did what you had to do because that's all you knew. But all that being said, let me tell you this. If you've been watching my talks for the past, almost a year now, or you've known me longer and this and that, and you've gathered new information, and you've learned things about self-care, you've learned things about boundaries, you've learned things about the recovery process, you've learned about yourself, you've learned about communication, you've learned about what it takes to continuously personally develop and grow, if you've learned all that. And despite of all that knowledge, you continue to do things that you did then and there before the knowledge. So if you've learned what healthy boundaries are, if you've learned what healthy communication is, and despite of that, you put your boundaries down, you put your walls down, you communicate, you lash out, you do all that kind of stuff like that, guess what? That's on you. That's on you, because now the difference is this: you know better. If you did something in the past and you didn't know any better, please, 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 please find a way to forgive yourself, because that guilt you'll hold on to will really, really eat at you. And the other things too, so hopefully that made sense, and I hope that gave a little bit of relief to a few of the family members here that are still holding on to, some of the stuff in the past that they wish they could have done it earlier, or known better, this and that. Life always, we've heard this, it's 2020 in hindsight, right? You look at the rear view mirror and everything's crystal clear. But when we're going through it, there's so much uncertainty and doubt and fear. But you look back and you're like, oh, all that made sense, right? So You never had the perspective you have right now, so you couldn't have known the things you know, right? You weren't where you are right now. So the next one that we have here is still about emotional stuff. So you got to learn how to forgive yourself. And the other thing too is there are certain feelings that are still unprocessed in you, and you need to process them, right? So what are those feelings? Well, sadness. Sadness, by the way, when left untreated, turns into things like depression. Yeah, that was I want to just because Jim put something in there. Jim, by the way, is he's 16, 17 years, something like that, clean and sober, 17 maybe. And he's a very, very good clinician, counselor. And what he put up there was, don't set boundaries you don't intend to keep. So that's a pretty solid one. So he's saying, hey, if you're not going to keep it, don't even set it. Because by setting something, and I think, Jim, I'm talking about the right thing, and then not doing it, it's like a double loss. Because the first one is the fact that you just gave up on your own word. The second one, your loved one realizes something. Oh, the next time they set a boundary, they don't mean shit. Oh, their boundaries are weak. They're just saying it right now. They're just all talk. I can still do whatever I want and get away with it. So if you do set a boundary, make sure it's one that you know you can keep. So great insight there. Thank you for that. And so I was talking about sadness, which leads to depression. I'm talking about anger, right? A lot of you are pissed off, by the way. And I'm not saying you're straight pissed off about, your loved one. Some of you are, and you got to own that if you are. It's okay to be angry at someone you love. It's like, for someone right now, it's just like, how can I love someone and be angry at them at the same time? Oh, you can, and it's okay to. It's not anger or love. It's anger and love. Actually, let me teach something there. A lot of human beings live in this world that they call a binary world. It's either black or white. It's one or two. It's right or wrong, right? However, we don't live in a binary world. We don't live in a world that's either this or this. We live in an inclusive world. It could be this and this. You can love someone and be pissed off at them. You can. You can be happy and be worried at the same time. So it's not or. And I'm telling you, this is really important because some of you are pissed off at what addiction's done to your life. Some of you are pissed off at the fact that no matter how often you tried to help, you weren't able to succeed. Some of you are pissed off at the choices your loved ones made, despite of loving them. And you have to go and emotionally process all that stuff. You have to emotionally work on that stuff for yourself. You could do that through, like I said, therapy, through talking to a professional, through sponsorship, through the steps, through journaling. You can get all that stuff out. Trust me, you can. But you got to first acknowledge that it's there, right? And some of you have suppressed it for so long. You've suppressed your sadness, your anger, your frustration, your resentment. Some of you, by the way, when they talk about doing a 12-step program for family members, the same steps you guys work is the same steps that addicts, alcoholics work if they choose to go down a 12-step path. When it gets to the fourth step of that, which I hope one day you all get to experience it, one of the components of it is to write down all of the resentments that you have in life. And I tell you this, that your loved one often will make that page. Like you can actually have a resentment towards someone you deeply love, right? You can have a resentment towards their disease. You can have a resentment towards their actions they've taken. You can have a resentment towards a multitude of different things. The fact that you've blown all your money on a certain thing, you've given so many opportunities and they failed it. But then the important part becomes this: what was your part? We all have a part in life. And the only way you get to that clarity, the only way you get to that understanding is by doing the work. So emotional self-care is so important. If you're trying to go to the next level, if you're trying to achieve recovery, emotional self-care is something you got to get into. So hopefully that made sense. The next one that I have here, there's a few more we're still going through, is the next one's physical self-care. The number one complaint, the chief complaint that family members give to clinicians about the addiction or mental health journey of their loved one is it significantly impacts their sleep. Right? I've never met a family member that a kid's going through a raging addiction that they say, yep, I sleep like a champ every single night. No, no, you don't. The ones that do, they've resigned to the fact. So what happens is 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, 10 years goes by, and their loved one's still doing the same stuff, and they're still allowing them to do the same stuff. At that point, they become desensitized. It's like a normal thing for their loved one to just be effed up and screwed up and not call and all that kind of stuff. So they don't care anymore, and they sleep, but they're in denial. They're desensitized. They just kind of like became okay with a situation that's not okay, right? It's a conditioning. But for the most part, most human beings, and you know this for a fact. I mean, I've talked to most of you individually. You know for a fact that when your loved one is using alcohol, drugs, not showing up, their behaviors change, you're worried about their habits, they're just kind of not themselves, their eyes look all weird, they're nodding out, they're stealing stuff and this and that, you're not sleeping well. You're not. And how many moms over here, dads over here can attest to this one? And I guarantee you, without even knowing if this was your case or not, you slept with your phone on your chest at night, right? Why do you do that? Because you're anticipating a phone call. Hopefully your loved one, but unfortunately the phone call you're anticipating is from like the coroner's office, from jails, from cops, from law enforcement. And if you think that that counts as sleeping, oh man, you're fooling yourself there. So sleep is what we need to actually balance our mind, balance our body. It's a regulating system, right? Not everyone needs the same amount of it. We're all different, but we need good uninterrupted sleep. So when you get into the recovery process, you have to start getting back those nights you gave up. You have to get back those nights you gave up. And some of you might say, hey, even without my loved one's addiction, I have a hard time falling asleep. Yeah, sitting up in the, what St. John wrote right there, sitting in the porch waiting for him to show up. It's like that porch can, by the way, he's saying sitting in there, it's not like 1 or 2 minutes. You know what I mean? It's not like waiting 5 or 10 minutes. Like he's sitting there till like 2, 3 in the morning. There's probably some calls and text messages that have come through. Oh, I'll be there in 5 minutes. I'll be there in 5. And then all of a sudden no one's picking up the phone and God knows what's happening in the middle of all that, right? And that's like not one night, right? It's over and over and over again. And at the time, the family member here, to speak for them, at the time they were doing the best they could because that's what they felt like they needed to do to show their love, to show they cared, to change their behavior. Today, they know better than that. Today they know, man, that is not the move to go to when you're trying to have someone show up to your house, right? So wonderful stuff. I know that's one great example. But the physical stuff, the physical self-care stuff that I'm talking about, some of you, and this might be a helpful hint for anyone that has had sleep problems even before their loved one's mental health or addiction or anything like that. If you come from a dysfunctional home, okay, if you personally, so put your loved one aside, if you come from a dysfunctional home, that in that house, there was a lot of chaos, loudness, a lot of different children, a lot of different kids, a lot of people fall between the cracks, that kind of stuff. And when it was bedtime, and you would go upstairs or downstairs, wherever your bed was, and all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock and everyone's supposed to go to sleep, but you stayed up till 12, 1, 2, and you couldn't fall asleep, and you're either watching stuff or on your phone or distracted, this and that. You learned that that was the only time you had throughout the day to be able to have some quiet time to yourself. Like the only peace that you had in your life was the few hours that you would go to bed. This is a case with a lot of young kids growing up, by the way. And what happens is that becomes conditioned. And later on in life, when you actually have peace in your life and you go to bed and you can't fall asleep, it's a pattern that was developed in the brain that when you go to bed, that's like you get wide awake because that's the peace time you had. So finding a sleep hygiene routine. What a sleep hygiene routine means, it's like a disciplined way of going to bed at night, right? And it has to be structured in a way that helps you fall asleep more routinely at the same time. And this could include things like, I'll say this when parents are going to freak out. It could be putting your phone on, silent, God forbid. It could be turning off all electronics. It could be turning off all, light. It could be setting yourself a time that you're going to allow yourself to read a book or be on your phone or whatever the heck it is, and just cutting it off at that point. If you continue to do that over time, you'll realize that your body has a certain rhythm, a certain cadence, and it could fall asleep. It could shut down on its own. And that's a beautiful thing if you could do that, because the more sleep like restful nights you get back, it's just chalking off for all the ones you didn't sleep. Now, how many sleepless nights did you have? Many, many times in that case over there. And you know, when he says many, many times, he's talking about many, many times. So we need to get many, many times of good sleep to start counteracting those ones, right? To start getting them back. So sleep is a huge one. I don't think I'd be doing my job if I don't talk about diet. For those of you who watch me every week, you probably get so annoyed. I don't care. I'm going to keep talking about it. You are what you eat, right? The food that you choose to put in your body when you're in the recovery process matters. If you want to have the best ability to improve your thoughts, your emotions, right? All the stuff that I'm talking about here, the food you actually consume is a vehicle to get there. The more crap you put into your body, the less you're able to change your thoughts and change your emotions and all that kind of stuff. This stuff is highly correlated. You can't just put whatever you want in your body and wonder why I'm not having, positive thoughts. These things are highly, highly correlated. So I'm not going to get too deep into the physical diet part. And the other one obviously is the body, is taking care of your physical body. Your body is a temple. How do you take care of it? I don't know. I hope you do. I hope you don't just sit around all day wondering why it's not going to get better. And by the way, I'm not talking about hardcore, high intensity stuff, man. Just go walk 30 minutes a day. Replace some of the bad food that you eat with some healthy, natural food, and just see how overall it just helps you. And so physical self-care, if you don't have that in your life carved out, carve it into your life now. Like starting today. At some point today, I don't know, I know the weather is different all over the country. If you're in Orange County, you have no excuse not to go outside. No excuse. And wherever you are, if you need to bundle up or, and get warmer, go do something today for your physical health. The next one, it's this one I'm going to probably spend the shortest amount of time on. Hold on. Juice, my friends. I've been lagging on this talk. I know I have. This juice is carrots, oranges, turmeric, and ginger. So it's delicious. It's good. It helps with multiple different things, including vitamin A and vitamin C. Turmeric helps with inflammation, and it's just a beautiful thing to drink. So these are really easy to make, by the way, in the home. Pretty cheap too. Practicing what I preach for you guys. So professional stuff is how many of you, when you're in your professional worlds, when your loved one's going through mental health challenges or addiction, you were there but you weren't there. Right? You were so distracted that you were just like a robot going through the motions. How many of you use work on the flip side as almost like a drug to be distracted from it, and you overwork? You don't take your lunches, you don't take vacations, you don't take days off. You got to find balance with that stuff. Like when you're at work, you got to be there. When you're at work, thank you, Elsa. It's a good juice, delicious. When you're at work, you have to be there. Right? And when you leave work, you got to leave work at work. If you can. I know some different jobs are different, but you got to leave it there. If you haven't taken your vacation days or your sick days, you got to take them. If you need a mental health day, you got to take it. If you hate the job you go to every single day, you have to, when you're not working, look and see what type of a work relationship do I want to have that makes me feel fulfilled, that helps me continue to live the life I have, or do I need to make changes in my life to change my career around? Like, we're only here, by the way, for, if you're lucky, 90 years, right? That's like, if you're doing a good job, if you're killing it, we're here for 90 years. The first 18 years of it doesn't count because you're not really working in any profession, right? The last few years of it, let's call it 80 and up, doesn't really count because you're not really working at any, high capacity or anything like that. So from 20 to 70 or 80 is pretty much all we're talking about here. It's not that long of a period of time. And if you're spending that with a job that you hate, if you're using that, if you're wasting, if you're somewhere that drains your vitality and this and that, I don't know. I don't want to give you advice saying, hey, go switch it up, but go switch it up. If you can switch it up, find something, even if sometimes you have to take a pay cut. I mean, money is one of the cheapest things in the world, by the way. There's nothing, you can be fulfilled from a job and feel happy and content and just love it while making less money than someone else that goes and hates the job they do. And even if that's not the case, maybe just in your current job, there's certain skills and certain training and certain development and certain stuff that you can get to improve the quality of your job, right? So you can still be in the same world, but when you're going through the addiction process of your loved one, when you're going through mental health challenges of your loved one, you're not thinking about these things. You're like a robot. I have to go to work today because I need to make money because my kid's going through addiction. I have no choice, right? It becomes like our world becomes so narrow. Our world becomes so closed off that we don't see the possibilities of other things. Good, Jim. I'm glad you love your job, bro. You're not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. So what happens is explore it. Explore it. And if you are in a job that you actually like, but you're feeling like you're kind of not loving it the way you did before, take some time off. You know, that's a cool thing, man. We have these days off and we have time off, and some people just don't use it, you know, and just use it because a few days off gives us some perspective to look at things and sometimes get reinvigorated, get excited again. So the last one that I have here is spiritual self-care. And some of you might be thinking like, what the heck is he talking about here? So spiritual self-care could be multitude of different things, okay? So spiritual, for me, it just means connection, okay? Connection. Going somewhere, for example, like nature, going out in nature, going in the woods, going in a forest, going to the ocean, watching waves, hearing waves, feeling wind, right? It helps us connect to life. That is in itself spiritual. The act of meditation, right? Meditation, closing your eyes and taking deep breaths in and exhaling out, allows you to connect to yourself. That is spiritual. Some of you might be religious. You have different religious disciplines that you have. It's a part of your life. When you engage in those activities, when you engage in that world, you feel connected, whether it's connected to your higher power, to your God, to the others that are in the same experience with you. Spirituality just means connection. We all know the opposite of addiction is connection. Because when someone's going through addiction, yourself or a loved one, how disconnected are you from yourself? How disconnected are you from others? And how disconnected are you from the world? Right? I know for a fact that the answer to all those is a lot. So in the recovery process, the opposite of addiction is connection. You need to find ways to get connected to yourself. You must find ways to get connected to others, and you have to, like it's like a necessity to get connected to the world, because we're all interconnected. Whether you want to accept it or not, man, we're all interconnected. What's happening here is impacting you. What you do is impacting someone else. What they're doing is impacting someone else. And then what they're doing is going to come impact me, right? That's just the way life is. And when the more we understand that, the more we realize how important connection is, the more we add in our life. So the final takeaway from all this, my friends, yes, Julian, spiritual for the win. You're a good man. So what we do is this. You leave this talk today. On the top of the paper, you write self-care. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. So write that on the top of your piece of paper. And then you write down these different areas: personal, psychological, emotional, physical, professional, and spiritual, right? On a piece of paper. And then write down what you're going to do for each of those areas. What you're going to do for each of those areas. How are you going to engage with them? How are you going to improve them? How are you going to enrich them? How are you going to feed them? Once you do all that, when you get off this talk and you have that plan, you must incorporate those in your life. It will help you have balance. It'll help you feeling better. It'll help you feeling good. Because if you neglect any of those areas, right? If you don't put air in any of those areas, it's not going to work. What's the perfect example? Imagine a car, right? 4 wheels. If all 3 wheels have air, but one of them doesn't, what happens? So if you take care of your psychological, emotional, spiritual health, but you don't do anything for personal, or you don't do anything for physical, and you're wondering why you don't feel good, it's because one of your tires doesn't have air. Let's give another analogy. You would never let your cell phone battery go all the way down to 0 and continue to do that for a couple of days. What do you do at the end of the night? You plug it in. You you got to make sure you plug yourself into your wall, your socket, your source of energy to bring you up again. And you have to do it every day the same way you charge your cell phone every day. Right? Some of you have been a dead cell phone walking around this world for years and years and years and years, wondering why you're not getting reception and why nobody's calling you, why you're not connecting. Right? I need to stop right now. I'm going to start going into weird analogies for you guys, but love and appreciate you. So check this out. Each week I'll be back again doing this. If there's any topics you want, please write them on the side. I'm very, very good with preparing with the topics that you want. And also, what I'm going to do is on Sundays, like I said, 1:45 p.m., go look on my personal Facebook. My personal Facebook is Param Nimatola. Find me there. And then there's a link last week that I did with this talk with this brilliant doctor. That is always, always, always going to be hopefully on. I'm sure, I think tomorrow we're going to have one, if not the following week, and so on for the rest. I would love for you to come there. You'd be surprised if you watched the video from last week, how beautiful it was that people were coming in and their videos were popping up and we were talking to them and really making a difference in their recovery. We talked about anxiety, the link between anxiety and addiction. So I love and appreciate all you guys. Looking forward to continuing to be there for you. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Until next week, goodbye, guys.